I couldn't not. It was never an option because we have feelings. Welcome to a Notsam Wrestling emergency podcast coming to you still from Atlanta, Georgia, straight out of the State Farm Arena. Now, if you're wondering why these emergency podcasts are coming so late, it's of course because I'm also doing the recap podcast after both Saturday night's main event and Evolution. But of all times to do an emergency podcast, I would rank, and maybe it's recency bias, I would rank this easily as a top 3 cash-in of all time. And it's probably not 3. I think it might be right there under Seth Rollins for WrestleMania 31. It's tough for me to think of a cash-in other than the Seth WrestleMania 31 that I enjoyed more than Naomi cashing in at Evolution tonight. Of course, the main event is Rhea Ripley versus Io Sky, and there's, I think, a couple reasons why I love this cash-in. Number one, because it's Naomi, and Naomi's doing the best work in her career right now, and you want to see people get rewarded for that. What we want, you don't want this like transition between generations. You want these generations to coexist. You don't want to think like, okay, well, the wrestlers that have been here for a while, and then there's this generation of wrestlers in NXT, and when those NXT wrestlers come up, those wrestlers that have been here for a while go away. No. The wrestlers that have been there for a while that are still good and continue to do great work, they stay, and the NXT wrestlers that are great, they stay. And we see these wrestlers that we've seen for as long as we've seen in an entirely new light. I would argue that happened with Charlotte Flair tonight in that tag team match, especially when she and Sol Ruca started going at it. It was like a completely fresh coat of paint all of a sudden. And I would argue that the same holds true for Naomi and the fact that she's finally like figured out this thing where she's doing this character and do these ridiculous laughs and saying these ridiculous things and showing up in ridiculous spots, and she's got caution tape all over herself, but for some reason it's resonating. It's not coming across to people like it's phony. It's not coming across to people like it's a silly thing. For some reason it's resonating. That kind of, I don't know, creative output for whatever reason reflects the way that I think a lot of people in the audience view the way Naomi should be acting at this point. The fact that she isn't getting more is enough to drive a person crazy. And then we're left with this unhinged version of Naomi. So, and it worked just like, when Seth Rollins cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 31, sometimes people don't remember that earlier in that night he had lost to Randy Orton. And I love it when stuff like that happens, because immediately you start going, okay, well then if you are now the champion, the person who beat you earlier in the night can sit there and say, well, I would like a shot at that championship since I beat the champion on the same night that champion won that title. And that's legit. And the same thing happened with Naomi at Evolution, where Naomi loses straight up to Jade Cargill in a way where maybe there's a story going forward with Bianca Belair. Maybe there's a story the way Bianca did not smile at all. She wasn't really happy to raise Jade Cargill's hand. You could read that as she didn't want to get in between her friends. You could read that as she didn't want Jade Cargill to win. You could read it many, many different ways. But the idea that there is still a rivalry between Jade Cargill and Naomi is kind of out the window, especially since Jade Cargill now moves on to the WWE Women's Championship at SummerSlam and Tiffany Stratton. I think the fact that you bounce right off of that with a cash-in, and here's the other reason why I love the cash-in. Nobody saw it coming. A cash-in that nobody sees coming, but everybody wants, is beautiful. And when I say everybody wants, I don't know. I haven't checked online. I haven't checked Twitter. Maybe people didn't like it on Twitter. Maybe they did like it on Twitter. I would think people liked it. I know people in the audience liked it because I was watching wrestling fans, female wrestling fans specifically, that had a degree of disappointment when Naomi lost her match. And the fact that those same fans got to watch this happen for Naomi, I think is one of those kind of magical wrestling stories. But I think the fact that nobody, even with that briefcase in play, nobody, myself included, ever came up with this proposal. You know, when it was Gunther and Goldberg at Saturday Night's Main Event, we came up with infinity different finishes. You could check this YouTube channel. I don't know if it's on the audio feed of the podcast, but like we were talking about it on Sirius, we were talking about it on the podcast, we were talking about it everywhere. Maybe this could happen. Maybe there could be a cash-in. Maybe then Roman Reigns. Maybe Goldberg could win. Maybe Gunther could win. Maybe then this. Then with this one, it was like, for whatever reason, we forgot that briefcase travels between brands. We just go, well, okay, Naomi's just going to go after the WWE Women's Championship. And like in my head, I go, okay, she's probably going to save it for SummerSlam, and she'll either cost Jade the match or Jade will win, and then Naomi will cash in. And that's sort of, you know, the thinking of, it's a very linear way of thinking about it. But because we're so locked into that idea, we don't think for a second, well, that's an idea. That's something that could happen. But also, what about what's going on over here? And with Seth Rollins, who we don't know what the status of him or his briefcase is at the time of this podcast, but recording. But an effort has been specifically made to show Seth Rollins having an interest in both the World Heavyweight and the WWE Championship, to say that like Seth could easily cash in on either of those two titles. But that was never showcased really for Naomi. And on top of it not being the title that she was after, number one, she was not involved at all in Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley. And number two, I think we all viewed the Io Sky Rhea Ripley story as one where it's like, yeah, the whole purpose of this is to put a bow on it. Right? We've been telling this story kind of since right before WrestleMania of this idea that Rhea Ripley is underestimating Io Sky. And then act two of that story is Rhea Ripley's never beaten Io Sky. Rhea Ripley can't beat Io Sky. And, you know, I don't think that Money in the Bank, in most cases, it really doesn't make sense to turn your Money in the Bank cash in into a triple threat. Almost never. Like, it makes a lot more sense usually to just wait until the champion is vulnerable and then go and cash in. Because if you make it a triple threat, you got to take care of two people. Tonight, it made sense, number one, because they were both kind of dead. But number two, it made sense because we don't know who would have won that match. We don't know. Rhea never got the chance to beat Io Sky. But we can't say she would have necessarily. We don't know, and we never will until we have to revisit Rhea and Io. We'll never know. I also thought that they did such a good job of setting up a scenario where they would be that vulnerable, right? Because Naomi had already gone through what she had gone through earlier in the night. So how can you sell me on the idea that Naomi, after taking that beating, has more gas in her tank by a lot than either Rhea Ripley or Io Sky? And that whole sequence of knocking out Jessica Carr, of going out into the audience, of Rhea attacking Io with the headbutts, of Io jumping off the crates and hitting Rhea, of like this whole, 3 to 5 minute chunk of these two have nothing left, except Rhea's still kicking out of this, Io's still kicking out of this, but they are dead. And then all of a sudden, that music hits. And the music hits, Naomi comes out. She, number one, has waited until the referee is up. But number two, knows that immediately, when you turn a match into a triple threat, the disqualification goes out the window. So now we're utilizing those rules. And I like the whole purpose of making matches a certain way is that you can utilize those rules, right? So like Becky Lynch winning the Intercontinental Championship in a triple threat, She just waited until the timing was right, until Bayley had knocked out Lyra Valkyria, and then rolled her up. Because in a triple threat, that's the smartest way to do it. One is knocked out, and the other you can catch by surprise. Maybe you'll win. In this one, she goes, the best part of a triple threat is that it's no disqualification. So she uses the briefcase as a foreign object, and it's completely justified. They don't just go, oh, well, there was such a rush going on that nobody noticed, or the referee didn't see, or, oh, I guess they're going to let that one go. It's like, no. They made it a triple threat. So boom. And then throw Rhea out of the ring. So immediately you're like, okay, that's taken care of. And now get that split leg moonsault. And you beat Io Sky. And at the end of the night, I had thought that the purpose of this was so that at the end of the night, Rhea Ripley could stand strong, holding up the Women's World Championship that is now hers again. And going into SummerSlam, Rhea Ripley is at the top of the division, and she's declared herself at the top of the division on the premium live event that is made to celebrate the women's division. And instead, you have Naomi, who's doing that. Naomi did an interview with us on the Evolution Recap podcast that has gone up on WWE's podcast feed. So I would absolutely suggest you take that out. Comes in as character, then kind of slips off and is kind of more out of character, explaining maybe why the character works, explaining how this character has come up, how the evolution from Glow came to this. But Naomi now goes over to Monday Night Raw. Naomi is now I would imagine Naomi is now the champion on Monday Night Raw. So I don't know where that leads. I would guess that the SummerSlam match is going to be a triple threat, right? Io versus Naomi versus Rhea. Unless, I don't know, maybe there's something else for Rhea. Because another part of this was that we were saying, it's difficult. If Rhea's not at the top of the division, I don't exactly know who Rhea is. So unless Rhea's got another story with somebody, maybe they're going to do, they're doing a gauntlet match with the men to figure out who faces Gunther at SummerSlam. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet, we did an interview with Gunther on the Saturday Night's Main Event recap podcast on the WWE podcast feed, which was unbelievable. But they're doing that for the men. I mean, maybe you do Rhea versus Io on Raw, and only one of them face Naomi for the title, and maybe there's somebody else for Rhea to start a story with that cost Rhea the match, so now you can have another example of Rhea not being able to beat Io, and then you go to SummerSlam with Io versus Naomi, unless you just do the triple threat. I don't know. There's a lot of different directions that we could go in. We're going to talk about all of this. These are just feelings. Emergency podcasts are about feelings. That's all we're doing here. I'm going to get more into the analysis of this and the rest of the show this week on Notsam Wrestling, as well as on Notsam Wrestling Live on SiriusXM. We're also, of course, listen, I haven't finished All In yet. Okay, for those of you wondering, well, you got an emergency podcast about this, you got an emergency podcast about that. All In is going to get covered on Notsam Wrestling this week, as well as on Notsam Wrestling Live on SiriusXM. I would imagine the Notsam Wrestling podcast is going to drop either Tuesday or Wednesday, so it'll be a day or two delayed this week. But we've got these emergency podcasts until then, and man, it is a wild time. I would love to know what you thought of the cash-in. Hit me up on social at NotSam. Leave it in the comments on YouTube. Put it in the reviews on Apple or Spotify. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, and I'll talk to you soon.